hotel historian. I started working at the Seelbach Hilton in 1982. I was the first doorman that the hotel hired, standing out front, tuxedo tails, top hat. And the reason why I got my job here was because a gentleman that I met during the filming of the movie Stripes, which I was a Russian soldier in Czechoslovakia. One of my favorite things about the hotel is the staff, the people that work at the Seelbach. They're all great people, and they all step out and help you in any way they can. In 2005, I was fortunate enough to write a book called Louisville's Grand Hotel, the Seelbach. It's a little bit about everything pertaining to the hotel. Ghosts, celebrities, movies, presidents, different celebrities that have stayed here, and different athletes. One of my favorite stories in the book is the Lady in Blue, Patricia Wilson, our signature ghost story. I get to meet and chat with people that you just wouldn't think possible. I've been fortunate to talk to a vice president. I've had VIPs of different corporations. Worked with Neil Diamond. I worked with Rod Stewart. Boy George was one of my favorites. They've all got their own individual stories, but that's just a few of the people that I've been fortunate enough to deal with. I hope you'll enjoy listening to these stories as much as I love sharing them with everyone. So sit back and listen. Here in the Rathskeller, this is what I call one of the hidden treasures of Louisville. It's made entirely out of rookwood pottery from Cincinnati, Ohio. And just as you see the little pieces, that's how it was shipped downriver from Cincy. They quit making rookwood back in the early 50s, and this is a collector's item. The price of rookwood is very expensive if you went out and tried to buy it today. We think this is the largest collection in the world. Louis Seelbach, in manufacturing this room, he designed it off of a postcard of a Rathskeller in Munich, Germany. The architects that designed the building, their name was Andrew and Dodd. They were two of the more prominent architects in the turn of the century. Now, Louis was a very superstitious fellow, and that's the reason why you see all the pelicans around the columns. Somebody once told Louis that the pelican was a symbol of luck. The signs that you see around the wall, we think they might have been Seelbach family crests. We're not really sure. But on some of them, you'll see lions on both sides. Those lions were the protectors of the sign. Around the walls, you'll see village scenes. Those are villages around Frankenthal, Germany, where the brothers were from. And that was probably what protected the family from whatever curses or whatever could happen. You'll see apples in almost every scene. And I found out recently that the apples were a symbol of prosperity, richness in Greek mythology. And on one side of the room, you have a balcony, which we call as Romeo and Juliet balcony. The glass are original Tiffany glass windows. There was a stage here in 1908 that extended out from the wall to the first set of columns. And it was where the small German band would have played at that time. After all, it was a German beer garden. You wouldn't have expected any other kind of music. And it's just one of the most unique rooms you'll ever see in Louisville. We are now in the Grand Ballroom at the Seelbach Hotel. This room is where the great wedding of all times took place. It was of Tom and Daisy Buchanan in 1925. Tom was a multimillionaire, I guess, at the time from New York City. He owned a railroad, he owned other things. Daisy was a Louisville local girl, and she had dreams of always wanting to marry a rich man. This is where it all started in the book of The Great Gatsby. F. Scott Fitzgerald loved the hotel from his days of being in the Rathskeller, even though he was kicked out on several occasions, that when he started writing The Great Gatsby, he knew that this would be part of it. This room is now called the Private Oak Room. It's where if you wanted to have a special dinner party, you could come and have your privacy. But in the early days, this was the gentleman's poker room. Al Capone and his friends would come to Louisville primarily because they had picked up their bourbon and moonshine in the hills of eastern Kentucky. And on the way back, they would stop off in Louisville, play cards, shoot pool. They loved to gamble. They had the security. They had the doors that were locked. And if they wasn't locked, there was somebody in the lobby that if the police come in, they would push a button and the doors were spring-loaded, they would close. And they had a way of getting out. They could go through this doorway,
and they would go down, and it came out by the Rathskeller. They would run through the Rathskeller and into the back of the hotel where the tunnels were. One of the tunnels was made out of bricks, and they would go to the buildings around the hotel. The other tunnel was a 5-foot concrete sewer pipe. If Al Capone was playing cards in this room, he always liked to sit facing the mirror. Some people said that he did it because he liked to watch his back. I personally think he did it because he liked to cheat. He always liked to win. He hated to lose. Between 1925 to 1929, during this time period, we were owned by a gentleman by the name of Abraham Liebling. Mr. Liebling was the head of the Jewish press. He was also a banker, which stands to reason why they were good friends. He probably handled Al Capone's money. Mr. Liebling sold the hotel in 1929, and there's no record of ever a poker game after 1929. And this was almost at the end of Prohibition, so there probably wouldn't have been. On July 14, 1936, Patricia Wilson fell to her death on a service elevator. She had moved from Oklahoma with her ex-husband. They had been divorced about a year, and they were supposed to meet in the old Seelbach bar, which was called the Stables in those days. And she was sitting at the bar, and word came to her that her ex-husband had been killed in a car wreck on his way to the hotel. The next morning, her body was discovered on the service elevator. It was wrote up in the newspaper, had a picture of her, and down the side of her picture it said her name, Patricia Wilson, said 24 years old. Was it suicide or accident? Well, in 1987, 2 different people, one on the mezzanine level and one on the 8th floor, saw Patricia Wilson walking through the elevator doors, and she was described as wearing a long blue dress and had long dark hair. And it was just as she was described in the newspaper announcement of her death in 1936. She hasn't been seen since. There's been people say that they smelled lilac perfume. They've had a feeling that she was around, maybe touching their shoulder in the elevator, but not really any sightings that we can prove. We're now in the Rathskeller. This is also the room that F. Scott Fitzgerald would visit on weekends in 1918 when stationed at Camp Taylor. And he would get a little intoxicated and have to be asked to leave. On one occasion, he was sitting at the bar, and in walked George Remus, who was the bootlegged king of Kentucky. And George happened to look up and saw this young guy sitting at the bar looking at him and then looking at the people. Finally, he walked up and asked him what he was doing. He said, "I'm writing a book about a gangster." And George Remus and F. Scott Fitzgerald became the best of friends, and a lot of people think that he modeled the character of Jay Gatsby off of George Remus. During the Prohibition era, this room was used as a speakeasy, and it was open to everybody. It wasn't open to just one certain group. But I guess if you could afford to be here and drink, you were welcome. This is now the Oak Room. This side was a gentleman's cafe, and as you see, there's big tables in here now. There would have been small tables for 2 to 4 people. And this side, beyond these columns to that way, was a gentleman's billiards club. You can see the original cue racks are still hanging on the walls, but anybody that knew how to shoot pool, they would venture to this room, even Al Capone. This hotel back in the early days, everything was gentlemen. There was gentleman's cafe, gentleman's billiards, gentleman's restroom. There was 2 entrances to the hotel, and one of the entrances was the gentleman's entrance, and the other entrance was the ladies' entrance. If the gentleman was coming here or he was going to a meeting, he could take his wife or his girlfriend to the 2nd floor where all the meeting rooms were, and those were the ladies' parlors. And there the ladies would congregate, read books, talk, play cards, whatever they wanted to do. The gentleman would come up here and shoot pool, drink, have a fine cigar, and just relax as a gentleman should. Now, this story actually came from New York Times. On Derby Day 1923, there was 12 gentlemen playing high-stakes poker in what was called the poker room, which is directly behind me. They would always have a security guard inside the door to make sure nobody cheated. Somebody tapped on the door, and when the security guard opened the door, it was 4 masked bandits. 3 of them held their guns, and the 4th guy walked around picking up all their money. When they got ready to leave, they took the security guard and shoved him into the linen closet, which is inside the poker room. They ripped out the phone that was in the wall, handed it to the security guard. They shut the main doors going into the poker room. They locked it from the outside and took the key again with them. They got away with over $20,000, and the reason why was because of all the derby festivities that was going on down on 4th Street. They just mingled in with the crowd. More than likely, they were probably dressed like the people in the crowd behind the mask. And to this day, they never have got caught.
The soldiers from Camp Taylor, they had no place close to them to what they call blow-off steam. And the Seelbach Hotel was probably the only USO associated with the military. And so they would come here and they would come down to the Rathskeller, and here they would dance with all the young girls. The guys would pay a dime for a dance, buy a ticket. And whether that was true or not, it sure makes a good story. But it was just a great place for them to come and blow off steam and just have a good time and then go back and do their job. It was probably unusual to have a USO in a place like the Rathskeller. But I think back to Otto and Louis Seelbach. Now, they came from Germany. They were wanting to be known as Americans. So they were probably doing anything they could to make a better visual appearance to Louisville and to the soldiers from Camp Taylor. And that was probably the reason why they held it here. It was because they wanted to be known as something other than just a hotel. This is the Seelbach Suite. This is the room that Louis Seelbach ran the hotel from 1905, the day the hotel opened, until the day that he passed in 1925. The parlor is the same today as it was in 1905, with the exception of a few of the pieces in the hardwood floor has been changed. The woodwork around the walls, around the ceiling, it's all original woodwork. The windows, the bay windows, they had to be replaced. But the 4 stained glass windows with doves in them above the bay windows, they're all original. This room has been the home to Harry Truman when he was here with Margaret and Bess. It was also the home for Keith Richards with the Rolling Stones, Linda Gray from Dallas, corporate executives, CEOs, presidents of corporations. It can be yours if you want to spend the night at the Seelbach Hotel. Looking out the windows, you're looking south from the hotel. And if you look to your right, you'll see an old building. It's called the Brennan House. It's the only family-owned home still in existence in downtown Louisville. And they are open for tours upon reservation. And I would be happy to make a reservation for you.